Hello and welcome back to WOLV-TV. My name is Riel Kamibayashi, and today we have an incredible guest I'm so inspired by and so in awe of. This is the wonderful one and only Mr. George Takei. George, thank you so much for being here. You're not only an icon, you've played Hikaru Sulu in Star Trek, and also you are a huge activist. You support LGBTQ rights and also immigration laws. And you're also a New York Times best-selling author, which is so cool, from your book, They Call This Enemy. There's so much to unpack from your wonderful life.
It's a pleasure being here with you.
I'm so glad that you are. I just wanted to start with how you got into this field to begin with. When was the moment you realized that you wanted to become an actor/artist?
Well, there's no one moment. It's a continuous series of moments that grow and get brighter and hotter and stronger and more passionate. The first time I saw something that was impressive in the way of acting was when we were still incarcerated in American prison camps, simply because we happened to look like this. It was after Pearl Harbor, and with no due process, we were incarcerated. And my father was a block manager, and he was able to negotiate with the camp command for a few evenings of movies after dinner in a mess hall, or dances for the teenagers, or classical folk singing for the Issei immigrant generation. One of those events was a movie. They showed both Hollywood movies. I remember seeing Charles Laughton as Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Why was I not made of stone like thee?
Or George Raft as gangster.
Wasted all these years boozing and loafing and playing cards.
And occasionally they also had Japanese samurai movies that were imported before the war, or some were made as silent movies. And when those movies were shown, it came with a man who had the script memorized, and he even lip-synced to the actors. And it was absolutely fascinating to see this man who was seated on the left-hand corner. He had a table and other sound effect gadgets, empty coconut shells, a triangle, pipe for the sword fight sequences, a clang, 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 and the horses galloping. There was a scene between the shogun and the samurai and his daughter, the princess. And the shogun would say, "Sessha ryōdai no minato ni ikoku no fune ga," and the samurai would say, "Ah, so de gozaimasu." And the princess would say, "Ma, osoroshii koto." All these voices coming from that one man in the semi-darkness. I thought he was fantastic. He was inspiring. The human voice can take you beyond barbed wire fences, take you beyond where we live to New York or the American West. And that's how my ambition to become an actor grew. My father said, "That's a fine interest to have, but you're Japanese American. There's not going to be that many roles for you. And if there are roles, they're not very attractive roles."
Wanting to still pursue acting despite all the challenges that you just mentioned, what kept you going? What was the thing that you always came back to, especially with the lack of Asian representation?
I started my college studies at UC Berkeley as an architecture student. But by that time, I had seen Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire.
Well, take it easy. It's not those cats.
James Dean.
That's right. I'm cute, too.
Montgomery Clift.
No, I ask you, am I a genius or am I not?
No.
Okay.
They were my idols. And so my interest kept getting hotter and hotter, but it was always being cooled by the realities that my father reminded me of. And finally, after 2 years up at Berkeley, I came back down to Los Angeles during the summer, and I had that father and son talk with him. I said, I really passionately love acting, and I want to try my wings. And the school that's been producing all of the fine actors was the Actors Studio in New York, and I want to study there. My father said, now let me remind you, New York is a crowded place, a competitive place, and an expensive place, and you have to be prepared to do it all on your own. However, if you go to UCLA, we'll take care of the expenses. He was a businessman. He knew how to construct a deal. And I made a self-discovery. I was a practical kid. I went with the subsidy. And as it turned out, that was the right decision because I was seen in a production at UCLA, a production of Bertolt Brecht's Good Woman of Szetsuwan. And in the audience was a casting director from Warner Brothers Studios. And he plucked me out of there and put me in my first feature film, Edna Ferber's epic three-generation novel that was being turned into a movie starring Richard Burton. And all my scenes were with Richard Burton.
My friend! Why? Very good to see you, Mr. Kennedy.
What are you doing here?
In summer, clean fish. In winter, clean dish.
So luck has to play a big part, as well as determination, as well as making the practical decisions.
When you landed and booked the role of Hikaru Sulu, I'd love to hear what came into your head, if you let your parents know what they said. What was the moment that, you were told that you were able to play it? And moving forward, what did you have in mind? I just would love to hear the moment that all happened.
Well, I went to this bungalow where the producer had his office, and I met the man, Gene Roddenberry. He was the creator of the series, and I saw after a few minutes that he was a very unusual producer. Most producers are only interested in your past credits and how well you present yourself. He wanted to tell me about the project and his philosophy and why he wanted to cast the way he did. He said, we live in turbulent times. We have the civil rights movement going on, African Americans sitting at the lunch counters for equal treatment or marching in the streets for voting rights and peacefully doing that. And yet that was being opposed by so-called law enforcement officers with attack dogs and water hoses. I mean, clearly unjust. And yet they were persevering. They'd be hosed down, but they would get up and march again. And young men being pulled off of the lunch counter stools, and they would come back. That determination is what American democracy is all about, standing up for rights. We had the Vietnam War going, which was splitting the country apart. So there was a lot of turmoil, and yet our televisions didn't reflect that reality at all. And he said he wants to deal with that, but television entertainment is essentially advertising. And you can't get advertisers if you deal with those realities. It separates the audience. And so he said there must be a way of dealing with that. And he decided he's going to use metaphors, placing the story in the future. The Starship Enterprise, this futuristic starship, was a metaphor for Starship Earth.
These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
And he felt that it was diversity that was separating the country at that time. But that diversity, that very diversity, can be a strength if you can work together in concert, can be the strength of the starship. And Starship Earth has that diversity. And if we can find a way to bring that diversity together and show that on Starship Enterprise, Starship Earth. And so for the captain,
Kirk here. We're minutes away, Hanson. What's your status?
he chose a Canadian, Bill Shatner. And Europe was to be represented by a Scottish engineer.
Well, Scotty, now you've done it.
Aye, the haggis is in the fire for sure.
And the actor that played him was a wonderful guy, a good friend of mine, a drinking buddy, Jimmy Doohan. And he told me that he's getting famous as a Scotsman, but he's really an Irishman. He said, I've drunk enough of the libation of Scotland to qualify playing a Scotsman. Africa was to be represented by an African-American actress, Nichelle Nichols.
Peace and quiet appeals to me, Lieutenant.
Who was not just African-American and also French ancestry, but she also had Native American ancestry. So Nichelle was the most American one of us all. And here was this other huge, vast part of the planet called Asia. And he was considering me for that part. And he told me he was having great difficulty finding a name for this Asian character. All Asian surnames are nationally specific. He wanted to find a name that suggested all Asia, Pan-Asia. And he had a map of Asia pinned on his wall, and he was sitting staring at it. And he found off the coast of the Philippines a sea called the Sulu Sea. And he thought, the waters of a sea touch all shores. And that's how the character came to have the name Sulu, who represented Asia. He was a visionary. He wanted to see the diversity of this planet coming together and working in concert as opposed to fighting each other. And I wanted that part so badly. I immediately called my agent after that interview and I said, this is the role I've been hoping for, and you've got to get it for me. And I got that call. I had the part.
Don't call me Tiny.
That's, I mean, truly incredible to hear. I'd love to hear more about your activism, especially in the LGBTQ rights and immigration laws, especially looking at your social media. I mean, you probably post more than most of my friends because you're always active, which is incredible. And I'd love to hear your background on what inspired you to get into activism, especially through social media, where that is leading towards.
I was a child when we were incarcerated. I remember the terror and the confusion, but I really didn't understand what I was going through. And as a teenager, after the war and we were released, I wanted to understand what was happening to me and why it was happening to all of us. I went to the library, couldn't find any books on our imprisonment. The only person I could go to was my father. So I sat down with him, and my father was an unusual man for his generation. So many people of my parents' generation didn't want to talk about the imprisonment. They felt ashamed, which was a wrong thing. The shame belongs to the government for behaving that way. But too often, the victims take on that shame, and so they didn't talk too much about the imprisonment with their children. And my father, quite contrary to that, did share with me all that he knew. I asked him, what's the one thing that you remember that really pained you, anguish, it filled you with anguish? And he thought, and he said, and this was when we were in the Arkansas camp, he saw his two boys, my younger brother Henry and me, playing on the dirt road with the barbed wire fence behind it. And he looked at us from a distance, and we were his hopes for the future. And he had so many ambitions, dreams about us. But here we were behind those barbed wire fences, and it tore him up. And when writing my book, They Called Us Enemy, I was remembering that conversation with them, and it really tore me up with sitting at my computer. And I remember I was sobbing as I wrote my memories of that. He quoted what Lincoln said, "Ours is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's a people's democracy. The people make our democracy." But therein also lies the weakness of American democracy, because the people are fallible human beings. We make mistakes. And so when the people are wrapped up in hysteria and racism, they make profound mistakes. And we happen to be the victims of that mistake. He said, Roosevelt was a great president during the 30s when the country was in a deep economic depression. But when Pearl Harbor was bombed, even this great president became fearful, and he signed on February 19th Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans, people that look like this, to be summarily rounded up and imprisoned in 10 barbed wire prison camps. Roosevelt was also a fallible human being. And he said, because we have this weakness in our democracy, our democracy is dependent on the citizens taking up the responsibility of making those words true, government of the people, by the people, for the people. And he encouraged all his children to be active in school, volunteer for projects, join clubs. And I got the message. I understood what my father was talking about.
This has been so inspiring for me, especially as an API performer who looks up to you so much. This has been a dream come true, so thank you. That has been WOLV TV. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.